What's up, basketball coaches, players, and fans? Welcome back to the Pass First podcast, where we share our knowledge of the game. My name is Augie Johnston. I'm here with my partner, Alex Engel, and we hope that you're able to take something away from today's episode that will help you in your basketball journey. Today, we have a special guest. I'll reveal the guest here in just a second, but he is a college coach at a Division II school, and we're really interested to learn more about his defense today, his offense, and a cool little coaching job that he had in Kosovo. So stay tuned as we get into today's episode. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, we have Coach Randall from St. Leo on the call today, who's going to be talking all about making different adjustments, defensive adjustments, offensive adjustments. We'll learn a little bit about some of the stuff he does there and just his overall journey to get to where he's at today at St. Leo. And Coach, thank you so much for being on. If you could just go ahead and give us a 1 to 2 minute background on your playing and coaching journey, that'd be a great way just to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Sure. Appreciate it. Thanks for being on. I'm always happy to share. And I think one of the great things about this coaching profession is most people are just, so willing to just give. And I've taken, way more than I've given in my life as far as what I pull from some great coaches and unknown coaches and just whenever I can. And so I appreciate this opportunity just to kind of talk with you guys. My background, I played Division III basketball for in Wisconsin at Beloit College for a great coach, a guy named Bill Napton, who was the president of the NABC at one stage. When I played, he had 20 consecutive winning seasons and had been to 10 NCAA tournaments, I think, in the previous 20 years in that stretch. And we went to won a Midwest Conference title, had a good team, played with some really good players, but just played with a guy who was a great offensive spacing coach, and learned a lot. And then I moved to Hawaii after that, shortly after I graduated. And then my coach called me and asked me to come back and take over as an assistant because John Tharp, who's now the head coach at Hillsdale, had taken the Lawrence job and he was our assistant. And so I did. So I ended up coming back, and that's how I got into college coaching. I applied to the Peace Corps. I was living above a PDQ and showering down at the beach in Hawaii because I had showed up and I was supposed to be in Hawaii. I was supposed to stay at my girlfriend's parents' place, but her stepdad at the last minute said I couldn't stay there, so I had to find a place to stay. We had a friend that played volleyball at Beloit that she sold knives out of a little office above a PDQ in outside of Honolulu, and so I was able to be in there I had to leave by 8 a.m, get out by 5. And I couldn't run the air conditioning while I was there. So there was no bathroom. I had to go downstairs to the PDQ to get a stick, prop open a bathroom door, use their bathroom. I showered at the park and the beach. I was pretty much a bum. And I'd applied to the Peace Corps and Headline News, and that's when my college coach called and asked me to come back and be a assistant. So that's the route you go. But I'd played for my dad in high school, and I just didn't want to be a high school coach, and which is ironic because later on I ended up becoming a high school coach, and it was probably the most amazing thing that I did. Because I didn't want to deal with parents. That's all. I just didn't want to deal with parents and didn't want to deal. So I coached there for 3 years, and I ended up getting the head job at Webster University. I was 25 years old. It's a D3 in St. Louis, and they hadn't had a winning season in 14 years, and we had won our first year and won the conference championship for the first time in school history our third year. We made the NCAA tournament, and then ended up kind of a crazy deal, but ended up going overseas and coaching in the UK. We got into a Euro League while we were there, so we're one of 2 teams in the UK that were in the Euro League. Played against the league had CSKA Moscow, the Lithuanian teams, a lot of the German teams like Würzburg, Frankfurt Skyliners, so some really good and Scandinavian teams. So I coached in 20 different countries in the 2 years there. I became the GM while I was there too, as well. And we made the playoffs, made the Final Four the first year to Challenge Cup to get into the league. And the second year we made the second round of the playoffs. And then we decided to come back. My wife, it was after 9/11, we decided to come back. I got on Brad Soderbergh's staff at St. Louis and was there for a couple years, about 2.5 years. And my dad was a high school coach. He died unexpectedly right before the start of the season. And I ended up coming back and coaching his team for staying after the funeral. We moved my wife and my daughter at the time. We have 4 kids now, but we had 1 at the time. And coached his team for 3 years, and pretty amazing experience to be a part of that. Pretty emotional, and ended up having some unbelievable. I was very nervous about coaching high school. I wasn't sure how it would translate, but I had a great group of kids, a great group of parents, and we ended up winning a couple of state championships and had one team finish ranked 7th in the country. And just had some. And again, it is the. I don't think I know I'll never have an emotional and connection of at a job as I did when I was coaching at Oshkosh West, for sure. Ended up getting a head Division II job. Eventually was assistant at Loyola. I had a little bit in what was at Stevens Point. We, as an assistant, we won a Division III national championship. And then eventually got myself to down to St. Leo. And again, they hadn't had a winning season also in 14 years. And we had won our first year, made the NCAA, picked last, and we finished third and made the NCAA tournament, and then won the league the next year and went the NCAA tournament again. Went up to St. Louis. My wife's from St. Louis. A job opened, kind of a big D2 job. And then during our tenure, we had 4 presidents in 4 years. Our AED that hired me got fired. And when this St. Leo opened back up last year, we came back down. So just been a good fit for us and good place for us to raise our family. We're happy to be here and have a chance to try to compete for national championships in a great league and in a great area of Florida.
Wow. I feel like you could almost write a book on that. That was a lot right there. And you're definitely
nobody would read it, but I could definitely write one, but I don't know who would all read it other than my mom, maybe my wife, kids. My kids wouldn't read it.
Well, I can think of about 100 questions that I'd want to ask you off all that. And one of them, I guess, is where would you say that you really got the coaching chops? You learned the most, because that's such a journey from, college to high school to overseas and then back and all that. Where would you say you learned the most?
Well, I think my dad, honestly, just growing up in a house, you're just immersed in it. That's your first assimilation. And then, there's going to be personality things that you just pick up without even knowing it. That I think I'm an intense guy. And I think that coaching style, my dad was very intense. I think that has definitely rubbed out. I should say intense. I'm way less intense than I was, 20 years ago. No question. But I just have a level of expectation that you practice hard, that you play hard, you compete. I mean, that'll get me as fired up as anything if you're lazy or if you're a bad teammate or thing like any coach would. But I think that's the one that does get me still pretty fired up. But yeah, definitely my dad. I mean, I think that for sure. But I pulled a little bit from everybody. I think, Bill Napton, he was, his spacing, the offense we ran was like a ballet, really. I mean, it just was so fluid. Everyone thought we were running Princeton stuff because back then there wasn't as much, without the internet, you didn't have as much sharing of information like that. You just didn't know where it came from, but it was really good stuff. And I've used it, I've even used it here, as an offense, certainly. And then when I was at St. Louis under Brad Soderberg, he's a Dick Bennett guy. He's out with Tony Bennett now at Virginia. Won a national championship last year. Just great half-court man-to-man defense. The value of taking care of the basketball was just, ingrained. And my dad was a Dick Bennett guy, so that was already part of what we did. But I think even more so, that part of winning became a big deal.
Nice. Yeah, I know that for me personally, being assistant coach and just being able to go to coach under other people and stuff was where I learned a lot of the game. We're excited to dive into the offense that you just mentioned a few minutes ago. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about defense, because at Lindenwood, when you were there, you guys had one of the top defenses in the country. You guys, I think, were ranked 33rd in the country for Division II that year. So can you tell us a little bit about your defense? Is it more of a four sideline, more of a pack line? Can you just give us a quick overview?
Yeah, you know what? I think that when I was my first few years, and when I was at Stevens Point too, as well, and certainly at St. Louis and at Oshkosh West, we were straight pack line. I mean, straight pack line. We were, and we were really good at it at St. Leo. Our first 2 years, I think we were in the top 10 in field goal percentage defense and effective field goal percentage, 3-point field goal percentage. I know scoring defense, but I think that's such a misnomer as far as judging how good a defense is. When you start looking at teams, announcers always talk about scoring defense, and that's really just your pace of play as much. I mean, you got to be good defensively, you got to keep them down, but your pace of play plays up so much into that. You can be a lousy defensive team and keep a team at, keep the pace down and only give up 70 points in college basketball. But there's a lot more that go into that. But I think the game has really evolved, and I think it's really grown exponentially on the offensive side in the last 10 years. I remember my dad used to say, and he'd say, it stuck out to me. He would say, great offensive coaches, they don't get the credit for the genius that they are. They don't get the credit for just putting guys in the right places and scoring points. What happens with great offensive coaches, even if you win a championship, or if you don't win a championship, they say, well, you had all that talent. You don't win it, they say you wasted that talent. Look at all, boy, they just do all these things and they're unbelievable. They don't play defense. They don't do this because the numbers are up. And again, you could be a good defensive team and have high scoring games because of your pace of play. And he said on the flip side, great defensive coaches a lot of times are overly rewarded with from the outside saying, oh, these guys, he's unbelievable what he gets out of that talent. And a lot of times maybe he's holding that talent down. Maybe he's just grinding it out. And just it's the way we viewed coaches. But I think in the last 5 to 10 years, that's changed a lot. And I think when you look at a lot of that has been analytics, and I think that's flipped on its head. And I think a lot now, and then again, it may change again, because I think Nick Nurse, who actually I coached against for 2 years overseas, he was in the same league when I was there. Was an excellent coach. He's kind of shown, and then Tony Bennett wins a national title with the defense. Nick Nurse has shown this grinder sort of style, right, at the NBA level. He's like a high school coach. He's running box and ones and triangle and twos and diamond, and ones, and then he's running like 5 different zones, and he's just mixing things up, out there and playing really good hard-nosed man-to-man when they play it, but just kind of fitting. Very much reminds me of a small college or a high school coach. And D'Antoni's offensive, his genius and the fluidity of his style, going back to, Phoenix when that kind of burst onto the scene with Nash and Stoudemire, and his analytics have gone up, with a lot of, well documented at Houston, but in the G League in general, been a lot of experiments there. I think, when the Houston has not got busted through, I think you're seeing more traditional basketball kind of going back to a traditional mode. But that is not to say that I think we're too far in. And I think offensively that there's some things we figured out that really are true, that are the teams you can win without doing them, but you won't go back to. But regardless, the game has stayed at a high level of lots of threes being shot and a fast pace, very open game, more shooters on the court. I think even 10 years ago, it was very common to have 2 or 3 guys who can shoot the three, decent to well, and 2 or 3 that can't shoot it. And now it's almost always at least 4 guys that can shoot the heck out of the ball, right? Of some level. Yeah. I mean, maybe one guy's a 30% 3-point shooter, a point guard that's just a big time player. And so, in this long-winded answer, I say this because we've evolved our defense over the time, because I don't believe, and even when I look at like Tony at Virginia, I mean, he's got great defenders, but he's got great offensive players, and they're really disciplined. But they're not midline like they were. They're in the gaps, but they're up higher in the gaps than they used to be when they were out of Washington State, when he had less talent. And they're a little closer to the man off the ball than I think they used to be. I think you have to be, because so many shooters are out there. You have to avoid some of that skip stuff. So what we've done, getting to the answer to your question here after all that lead up, what we've done is because of that, there's the 3-point line, the ball screens have become so prevalent, and such a dominant part of offense. And transition D, that doesn't change anything. We try to, stop transition D, trap transition teams, get back and get set and make them play in the half court. But because of that, I think when you're playing traditional pack and you're forcing to the middle, that it just leaves too much open for playmaking once that ball gets in the middle. And, we charted it and statted it and looked at different things. And it's not easy to get numbers at our levels. You can pull the NBA numbers and you can pull some of the Division I numbers, but some of the statistics can elude you. And some of it doesn't cross over as well as other things. I had on a side note, we figured a lot out. There was a GA here at St. Leo my last year, the first time around at St. Leo, 7 years ago. She was awesome, brilliant, and she was international. She's from Canada, so her visa had run up for her master's. Her GA she was done, so you have to continue to volunteer. So her and I were friends, and she asked if she could volunteer, and I said sure. So I had her do an analytics of Division II, and I had her break down all the championship for the last 10 years, all the Final Four teams, all the conference championship teams, and then also the last place teams in our league, the bottom teams, the bottom 2 or 3 teams, and then the top 2 or 3 teams in the Sunshine State Conference, and look at all the different analytics, a little Dean Oliver kind of stuff for our level, and pertains to the previous 10 years. And there was some different things that we pulled out of there for sure. I mean, all in all, the effective field goal percentage difference, like Dean Oliver, the offensive side was the big deal, but the difference between the two, because the only team to win the national championship that won it was a defensive first team in that tenure was the California, LA, Cal Baptist. Cal Baptist was the only defensive team to win it in that championship. But there was a lot of other stats to go into it. So because of that, because of all the different things, we decided to start forcing to the side. So we basically run pack principles, and we're also out a little bit higher than we used to be. So we're in the gap still. So we're a gap defensive team. But we do force down the baseline. And the other thing that we've pulled, and this was just recent in this last year, and I like this, is that I usually go to an NBA camp every year, obviously not going to one this year, but and I got to be friends with some of the guys on the Spurs staff, and I was down there, and I got to get involved, and they gave me a lot of information, a lot of video, and a lot of the stuff for their defensive playbook. And, some of this is probably 11 years ago, I guess, 10, 11 years ago. And the terminology, some of the defensive term. First of all, I was blown away by the defensive play. I mean, the offensive playbook I expected. But I was blown away by the defensive playbook. Like just how many different things and schemes and coverages they had, and how complex, and just their whole the system in general. And one thing that jumped out, and you see this in the NBA, 2 things actually, is flooding the ball. Okay, and we did that at St. Louis. We did it against D. Wade was in the league, Conference USA, because back then Conference USA had Cincinnati and Louisville, and they went to the Final Four, I think, that year. There were 2 in the country, and Marquette went to the Final Four. Great team. We used to flood Travis Diener. He rarely was on the side. We flood D. Wade. And so basically we bring multiple guys over to that lane line side and flood it, which makes sense in the NBA because of the 3-second call, right? Because the NBA 3-second, you got to be on one side or the other. They're loading up as they load up. But what you do on the backside, when the NBA does that, they have a rotation. They have back what they call a V-back back there. And so one guy basically zones up the weak side. And that jumped out to me. And I even though 3-second defense is, we don't have it. Obviously, we don't have to worry about some of those NBA defensive rules. It jumped out to me because I remember Mark Edwards, who was a longtime Washington University coach, and he was a assistant at Washington State. I can't remember, for 10 years prior to that. WashU in St. Louis, great D3 program was his alma mater. They had shut down sports for a while. They're opening it back up in the 70s. He took over, and he's a phenomenal coach. He has won a couple national titles. And I remember him telling me, because at Webster University was right down the road, so we talked some, that at times they zoned up. He had messed around with zoning up the weak side, like playing man-to-man, but all of a sudden just zoning up the weak side. Like, rather than what you said, when you're switching, that's what you're doing, right? But sometimes guys get hugged and switch, and they run into each other. Like when the ball's on a wing, let's say the ball's on the right wing, and there's 2 guys on the let's say the left wing. Those guys just form an eye and just get in a zone and just be there. And then you have the high guy and I'll have the low guy, and we'll just go from there. Who cares what they do? And so the Spurs stuff popped out in my head about the V-back. That's similar to what Mark had said, what Coach Edwards had done. And so we started, we tried to encapsulate that into some of the pack stuff, and then also with the forcing down the baseline, because you might give up some drift pass if you're going to force baseline, which may get that ball swung. You better be ready to get in a rotation and know where you're going. So we've used some of that, and I really do like it. I think it's important. Like anything, it feels a little Texas Tech-ish at times. I think it like anything though, you're going to have high motor guys. You know, here in the NBA talking about multiple efforts. You know, multiple efforts for sure.
Yeah.
You know,
Rotating a lot more.
Yeah, and I think defensively, you know, any good defensive team has multiple efforts. You know, that's not unique to the league. But you know, I know Texas Tech, they actually try to get you in rotation. They're actually okay with it. They're good with the chaos because they say we're going to be better in chaos than you are in your regular crap. You know, so basically it's the idea of like almost like a pressing team in the half court. Like that's my understanding of what Beer does. So we put a little bit of organization in that initial chaos of the ball swings to that opposite side. And also we are seeing it swing less when we force it down to that baseline, you know, for sure.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the other part of that, when we went to the MIAA conference, which has a lot of big state schools, Northwest Missouri State, phenomenal coach, Ben McComb, phenomenal program, you know, tons of ball screens. You're going to get ball screened 3 times in a possession if they don't get a good shot, 4 times, 5 times, you know, and there are other teams that just we saw so many ball screens, which was not as much as we saw in the much more than we saw in the Sunshine State Conference, which had more system-oriented, certainly ball screens, but more Princeton teams, triple post teams, you know, just teams that had coaches that had been here a long time, had run a specific system. So getting through all those ball screens, especially if you have a freshman guard or, you know, bigs are slow and so limited, really became a force. And we were great, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, we were a great defensive team that first year. Great. We're top, you know, we led the league, the MIAA and conference only play defensively, field goal percentage, effective, you know, 3-point field goal percentage and, you know, scoring defense. But at the end of the game, those teams change. And what they do is that last media timeout, they are taking their best player and your worst screen defender, and they're putting them in a middle ball screen over or a side open ball screen over and over and over again. So you throw out all that time you spent with all that system stuff. If you can't come off that ball screen on that side, that open side ball screen and get through it, that guy's going to get in the lane and make a play. So, and we used to trap a lot of ball screens, and sometimes you just don't have exactly the personnel to do it for various reasons, whether it's the trap on the ball, the rotations. But also, like, sometimes you're just running against teams who are really good at, you know, swinging that ball out and finding a shooter out. And again, it goes back to more shooters being on the floor. And that's so we've trapped less in the last few years, and we've been more icing, you know, downing the ball screens. And that's played into it a lot for sure as we've evolved. I think that's an important thing. Just always be evolving. You got to be careful you evolve yourself into, you know, spinning in circles, or your team, your players into circles. But I think I'm always looking to change and evolve and fix and tinker year to year what we can do better. And that's where we're at, and that's why we run what we run.
Nice. I like that. That was a great breakdown of how the game has evolved and how you use the whole analytics to kind of almost change the way you were playing Pac to now kind of how you're running the on the defensive end. And that was interesting that you had one of your grad assistants do that study. And because I like to look at the analytics as well. And I like to say, you know, here at the high school level, we're shooting way more threes than I think our school's ever shot. We're playing faster, you know, all the stuff that we see in the analytics. But at the same time, me and Alex have this conversation sometimes. Well, these analytics that we're getting are mostly NBA analytics. And we're applying them to the high school level. And so sometimes, I mean, last year, ball screens, we ran just ball screens all day. And this year I'm just taking a step back and looking at it and being like, okay, well, we do need those numbers for high school programs.
Yeah. And I think, you know, as they say, you know, so many ways to skin a cat, but even if you look at, you know, sometimes year to year in certain programs, I went back and looked at a lot of Bo Ryan stuff at UW Platteville, and I broke down a lot of his statistics. And so, they're really good at not turning the ball over, you know, his 4 national championships, and they're really good at getting to they're phenomenal at getting to the free throw line, like really good. But some years he had teams that shot a ton of threes and didn't get to the free throw line as much. They were not the elite level. I mean, they shot a lot of threes and higher pace. But in other years, so it didn't follow the exact formula. He'd clearly changed formulas, you know, to fit some of his personnel, and maybe just, you know, evolved from there. You know, it continued to evolve. And you look at the Wisconsin team that was in the national championship game a few years back. You know, that didn't look like, you know, a Bo Ryan or a Dick Bennett Wisconsin team from 10 years ago. That was an elite offensive team. I mean, an elite offensive team, and good defensively, very good. you would probably think by the numbers they weren't as good because, again, they're playing higher pace and higher, and they weren't running the swing to the way they used to run the swing. And I think the point is that, sometimes the analytics, there is a general template, but that doesn't always fit. Sometimes your team's analytics may be different in 2019-20 than what fits for the analytics, riding that analytics train, than 2020-21 or whatever it is. You can't. I don't think you can do exactly that. If you just have an elite, four-man that just knows how to play and gets it, but can't shoot at all, like, you might not be able to play the exact way, or point guard, and they're going to go under every ball screen, so we're not going to be able to get downhill on our ball screens unless we rescreen them or set. You might have to change a little bit how you play, to find, the winning formulas. And again, I think that, I think there are a lot of great, it's a great thing. I have this fear that our technology is going to get so good that there's just not going to be secrets anymore. And it probably is an irrational fear, that we're just going to, in sports, it's just going to all be there. Every athlete's going to be to peak performance that they possibly can be, by trainers and, computers and everything that we, tell them this, well, don't use this and stay off your Achilles tendon this today for 14 minutes because of this, whatever. But and I do still think that there's enough human error and human greatness within the game that just can't be quantified. And certainly at our levels, I think at our levels for sure. So sometimes a feel really matters, sometimes a feel just, coaching by what you think is right, not necessarily by the numbers, make a difference for sure.
Then kind of that mix of we've talked about this, Og, of using analytics, but also using your own eyes. It can't be all one or all the other. You gotta value the stats and take them for what they're worth, but then you gotta also use your own senses and experiences as a coach and to kind of combine that to find out what your philosophy is going to be and what's going to work best for you, because it's not a computer simulation. We don't just punch in numbers and, otherwise we would have no point in playing the games.
Exactly right. I'll give you two examples of that where I've bucked the trend for sure. And I have to say this, offensively, we are playing way faster. And it has affected our defense. And I don't know exactly, we haven't been as good defensively. And I think part of it is because we're playing way faster. There's an energy level, there's a focus level, there's an emphasis level for sure. But I'll give you an example. So Bill Fenlon, who I mentioned earlier before the show about Coach Brad Stevens at college, a great coach at DePaul and a good friend of mine. He pretty much he wrote the book on fouling at the end of the game, up three. He wrote that book. He did a long paper. He actually gave it to Jay Billis, and Jay Billis quoted it on air, but I don't think he gave Bill any credit for it. But he always says to me, I'm something along the lines of an idiot for not fouling because we haven't. But we've also been so good defensively, and we've been a low foul team, that the chaos that can ensue and putting them on the line with that, and maybe, a great rebound or a tip or bad luck, I felt like that was more with my odds because specific to my team, my analytics of my team. Like, we're good guarding the 3-point line. We're pressuring it. We're smart about fouling. We're not going to foul the situation. We can handle that. We can handle that into the situation where we're going to foul a shooter, and give them 3 free throws rather than the 2, or foul the guy at the end of the game, or whatever it is, whatever the situation is. So we don't foul on the ground to give them the 2 free throws. And the other one is a friend of mine is a really good won a championship of the G League, coached overseas, has been with the Rockets and the Pelicans and the Nuggets. Always says to me, and he's a great offensive guy, Chris Finch, and he says, basically, you're a fool for playing slow when we used to play slower. There's no number, there's no situation, no level that you would need more possession, shoot more threes. And all. But I argue back, and I've said this to other people too, but I've argued back that there is something to the grind at small college and college basketball in general, and there's something to the grind in high school for sure. Without shot clocks, especially. You play against a team who's solid defensively, and you say, swing the ball one time, and they're terrible. Swing it one time, and we're going to get whatever shot we get. So you have to try to convince your guys, go side, top, side, and now you got them. So it becomes a little harder to embrace that part of it wholeheartedly, I think, because there's 2 levels. One is it'll hurt you in recruiting in the long run. If you're winning moderately and playing a pace game like that, you'll get certain guys, and they'll embrace their roles, but also it will hurt you with guys that you feel would be a really good fit in your system, and they get, you'll get whatever. And also I think that it becomes, I mean, just in general, guys don't want to play that pace, that level, and ball handling and passing is not taught as much in summer ball, I think. I mean, not dribbling per se, but like teams, move the ball, swing, cut with space. So if you're running a system that has that, and if you're not artificially creating reversals with a set, maybe you're not able to get like this elite defender who also is skilled, who also is athletic, who also does all these different things that you want him to do, knows how to play, and be able to assimilate him to both sides of that ball. Got a team that swings it and takes care of it and finds great shots, and a team that just gets up after you defensively. They don't always work for us to find them at that level, and with length, because now we're probably looking at a mid-major second-team all-conference player. Yeah. They're hard to get, so.
Okay. So as far as the defense goes, I just want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that. So it sounds like you guys are forcing them, to the baseline, down the sideline, not middle like most pack lines, but you have all your guys in the gap, and it sounds like you're overhelping a little bit on the baseline. Mm-hmm. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, we do. We're jamming up the lane. I think a lot of what you want to do defensively is preventative, because we talk about anything. There's a couple of things. Anything that goes downhill, is going to create issues, whether it's downhill in transition or downhill in the half court. It's going to create issues, right? So now you're creating, if you're not Butch Beard, you don't necessarily want to be in rotation, and if you want to keep them from going with a full head of steam to the rim. Because when that happens, and I'm not saying into a charge, but just a full head of steam, get in that playmaking mode. And now you get guys leaning in and heading in. So, and also there's issues of balance. We talk a lot about balance. I think balance is, guys talk about balance offensively, but I think defensively is probably the single most important skill, learned skill that you have on the individual side of the ball, on that side of the ball. Bouncers are guy, like for instance, like if you're guarding the ball screen and you're showing, up over the top of a ball screen, you have a big, and he likes to reach. So anytime you reach for the ball, and assuming the guy is not dribbling about top of his head, and the point guard coming out the ball screen, is going to be down low, right, through a ball screen. In order for the big to reach, he's going to have to put his hand down low. In order for you to put the hand down low and be movement of carrying a ball screen, you're going to put weight on one of your feet. The bulk of your weight is going to go on the foot that the hand is leaning towards. Okay, so whatever hand reaches. So once you get to that foot, if he doesn't get that ball, he's never getting off that weight foot, that weight transfer. It's not happening. The guard is going to be past them, and they're going to be in a 5-on-3 behind you. That is what's going to happen. So there's an example of balance. If I'm in the gap and the ball is driven towards me and it's going across, and I lean in, or I'm late in the gap. Let's say that the ball's at the point, and there's a shooter on the wing, okay, solid player. Doesn't have to be amazing, just solid player. And I'm in the gap, and it's like, say, 18 foot between, good spacing between top and a wing, and I'm in the gap. Well, let's say I'm slightly closer to my guy, and that drive happens. Well, if I'm slightly closer to my guy's in the wing, so free throw line extended a little bit below, and the ball's at the point, I'm not going to be able to get to do anything to that drive downhill if it starts at the top of the key. Like, there's no way from where I'm at. Yet, countless teams allow that guy to go in to try to stop the ball. Once it's already – the drive has already started. So you start that. So once I go to – okay, so I'm on the left wing, okay, and the basket's behind me, and the drive happens here. I go this way. My weight is going to be on the foot towards the ball. I'm not getting back to that guy. That's the whole dribble drive is predicated on that mindset of defense, right? Of just leaning in and kicking, guys kicking out, kicking one pass, drive and kick gaps. Same thing, wing to corner, same thing, trying to leave. So we try to be more preventative, and that we want you further into that gap and with your hands out wide. So the wingspan looks and we'll do a drill, and not even just a drill, we'll just paint a point when guys start having their hands down rather than up in the air. We'll say, all right, stand back here. We'll have half the team stand back here. We'll say 5 guys, stand there in a defensive stance where you should be, guarding with guys in the wings, points, whatever. All right, have your hands down. And everybody will be half court looking at that defensive team. All right, now get in a stance, get your hands out. And it's amazing, like how little green space there is, or court space there seems to be, and how that just your mindset of like, I better not drive. A good player, a solid player, say, I better not drive into there because it's a mess. Coach is gonna be mad. Where are you going? There's no place to go. So you want to be preventative. So we talk a lot about being, looking like a predator, not looking like prey, not and we want you in that stance and we want you there. So the drive doesn't even actually happen. It's just a token, or he can't get going fast enough to create rotation. I'm already melting back. It's another term we took for the NBA, but like the drive happens at me, I'm melting back to my guy. I'm not staying unless I'm taking a charge or it's a straight up switch. I'm not staying with that guy, because by the time unless I can get a strip, he's going past me and I'm getting a strip. I'm going to take a swat at the ball. If he's going past you as you're happening, I'm not talking back tapping, just that where he's even with you when the drive is happening and you're still in a gap and wait, you might be able to get a strip on him. That's good. But actually attempting to put a weight to stop the ball is not good. That doesn't make any sense. So that part, is a big part of what we defend. Really, we work a lot of the minutia. As they say, the devil's in the details, and we put a lot of time in the defensive details for sure with that. And I've had some guys who are amazing at taking perimeter charges and just having a really good feel, whether it's their guy that they're guarding on the ball or it's off the ball, that's like, here's it comes and I got it. And they're few and far between. Again, that's another skill that just some guys just have a great feel, and you got to be laterally quick and balanced and all those things. And so and I'll give you another example. I'm kind of jumping all over defensively about within our system. One thing we teach, show hands-on contact. Anytime there's contact, we put our palms. Anytime, show hands-on contact. We say it. You're here to say it. If you're here once in a practice in a season, you're here to say it 1,000 times. Show hands-on contact. Show hands. Show hands. Show hands. Because the refs, they just see for that moment. Excuse me. And especially the guys in the baseline, whether it's post D, whatever, you get the arm bar and they start driving, you get tangled. Ball screen D, guy guarding the ball is trying to get through the screen, puts his hands in on him, like tank. Driving at you, we want those hands out. We want the chest. And then also, we talk about right angles. So there's a lot of right angles. So let's say a wing drive. And let's say I'm guarding the ball. And I'm trying to cut him off. So we're driving him into the short corner. And I want to go to cut him off. I can't cut him off. If the old put your foot out of bounds, keep him from going there.
Mm-hmm.
If you do that at a 45-degree angle and you beat him to that spot and there's contact, okay, the ref will call a foul on you. Mm-hmm. If you beat him to that spot, and so now we talk about being perpendicular to the sideline, cutting him off, but being as perpendicular as you can to the sideline. But if you do that and you have any hands on him and there's contact, they'll call the foul on you again. So there's one. So we talk about showing hands, and then there's one more area you got to be a right angle. You have to be a right angle to the floor when there's contact. So if I'm leaning forward or leaning sideways or whatever it is, like if I'm like this and I'm set, but I'm still one of those things, the refs will call a foul on you. And that's a huge part, as in going back to analytics, going back to Dean Oliver, whoever you want. There's a huge part of winning matches. Those ticky-tack, nothing fouls, besides putting yourself in foul trouble, just getting them to the line, letting a shooter see it go in, all the damage that can do. So we work very hard on that, and it has an effect for sure. How much depends on how quickly your guys pick it up, how athletic they are too, because if they're always playing from behind too, you're going to be in trouble situations there anyway, regardless.
Yeah, and I think the analytics tell us that we shouldn't foul, right, and put guys on the line. So Those are some great tips, and I'm writing that down. Show the hands. I think we'll have to definitely implement that in our team too. So, all right. Well, hey, let's talk a little bit about adjustments. But before we get into adjustments, I think any high school coach at any level or any youth coach could always improve their halftime routine or what their halftime looks like, including myself. So selfishly, I'd like to learn a little bit about what your halftime routine looks like and how you're able to maybe put in any adjustments in halftime.
Okay. Yeah. Well, my assistants, I usually have them, they'll come in with stats and whatever foul trouble situations. They need to know like who has the ball, second half, all those things we need to know this so we can talk about it. So I can talk with some authority about what we're going to do and what possession we're going to do it, some basic little things. And we meet initially and quickly, and they go over, what they've seen, what have you seen? Usually at that stage, as a head coach, you're either upset about something with your own team or you're worried about something with the other, no matter what. I've said so many times, the curse of the first half lead, you're up 20 points at halftime. And what happens the second half? For the refs, they start giving the 50-50 calls the other way. That's one for sure. Like, not intentionally screwing you, but yeah, it's no big deal. We can balance it out, and this coach won't be mad because they're going to win by 25. The other team comes out and makes a couple hard runs at you. If they don't quite get there after the first 2 hard runs, they pull some bench off. And if the bench can do it, then they really got something when those guys come back in. And your guys let off. There's a letdown. There's just going to be, you're fighting that letdown. And most games are won in like little 4-minute increments, right? You get the lead, you hold the lead, and that was the difference in the game. That little run, and he came in, he turned it over twice, missed 2 bad shots, and all of a sudden went from up 2 to down 7 and burned 2 timeouts. Like that's so. And then from that on, it's just about maintaining some sort of maintaining your advantages. So what we try to figure out is we talk a lot about foul trouble. The other team, who we can get into foul trouble, who we can attack. We talk about getting in the free throw line, limiting. We're trying to find basic things. We don't want to try to do, use verbiage that we haven't used in practice, but certainly we'll use strategies we haven't used in practice. So, there's been occasion where we've used some 1-3 chaser and haven't used it yet in practice and explained some basic concepts, or, thrown something in like a little 2-3. My college coach used to say, you can 2-3 is so basic, the slides, every kid's run something at some stage, that in a half, he always said, don't be afraid to use it in a half if you never worked on it. Don't be afraid. 1 half, like your guys will play so hard in it. Like, again, going back to multiple efforts, that'll negate any tactical issues that they have. They'll communicate, they'll go hard, they'll play. They'll be the very first, if you ever do that in a game, like I found your players to be incredibly connected in that situation, especially if you get the right guys in there that really want to prove a point, whatever. And so that can work. But then from there on, once there's some scout, and you lose some of that effort and it becomes more of a mundane, benign, another defense, then you better be good. You either better fit your personnel and not fit, who you're going against, or you better be good, tactically too. You better know what you're doing as far as slides and where rotations are coming from and rebounding spots and such. So we try to keep the adjustments. Again, like I said, verbiage that we know. We're looking for adjustments on both sides of the ball. It can be something simple like, all right, hey, we're too high on our ball screens. We got to start them lower. Or how are they guarding this? Like they're switching this ball screen. So the beginning of the clock, throw the ball inside. Like if we get a switch, get that big roll down, get it swung to the roll and replace, the lift action, and pound it inside. Make them pay for the switch. We're not making them pay for the switch. We're overcomplicating things here. There's things like that. I mean, we're trying to and then we talk a lot about, end half swell, start half swell, first 5 minutes of games, first 5 minutes of half. So that certainly is important, just about the energy level. Coming out and doing that, and you can feel it if your energy is bad. So if your energy is bad, you better find a way to light a fire under them, or set it up for making a lineup change, quickly. So I burned timeouts, in the first minute of a game. I've burned timeouts in the first minute of a half, for sure, because I think you got to be ready for the emotional aspect, especially if either the second half, the timeouts usually happen either when you have a big lead or when you're down big. You burn one right away. Like, you just try to get one, just get it righted. And in the beginning of the game, just any of those trap games, where you're just think like, yeah, you just probably need to light into them a little bit here and just redo it. I mean, everyone thinks that great coaching is this, like the new Rockne speeches and such. And so you only have a few of those. You only have a couple games before the game that you can really do that stuff, and it, plays it has a difference. You got a few halftimes. You got a few more halftimes. You probably got double that for halftimes, where you could probably tear into them and really like shock them. But if you did it all the time, they'd be sick of you. And so mostly, you're just trying to figure out what's working, what's not, and go from there.
All right, cool. Sounds good. So as far as making adjustments defensively, if you were to make, or I guess the question is, would you ever make the adjustment to switch to a zone or maybe some other kind of defense? And if you do make that adjustment, what's like a common defense that you like to switch to?
Yes, definitely. We make that adjustment. We have, and we've played. I've used a fair amount of 1-3-1 over the years. We use it just about any zone. Like I said, we use some, junk defenses in one, box and one, triangle and two. I don't like the triangle and two quite as well, because again, there's just a lot more shooters out there. You might use a box and one if you have a specific player that you're trying to get rid of, try to just take out, like everything runs through them. So it'll be less about stopping that guy and more about distorting the flow what they're doing. I think if you run it at our level, because there's so many good offensive players, I mean, you can run them for spurts and just kind of confuse them, and teams have done that against us too as well, for sure. Once in a while, you don't usually stay in it super long, but we've used some extended 1-3-1, and it's a little unique because we're, you know, our backs are to the corners and the sidelines. We're really out and extended, and you're looking for deflections, and you're out very high in it, and it can slow, it can slow a transition team down. If you're not a good rebounding team, though, you can really get hurt if you haven't played a lot of zone on the glass. I think that's where teams eventually try to get you. Either if they can't move the ball, that's one thing about the 1-3-1. If you do it well, it doesn't change sides, but it's just as effective for the offense if they can get in the middle of the lane on a drive on penetration and kick to that opposite side. That draw and kick situation is just as effective as the ball reversal if you're out overextended. So you got to be really good. You have to spend time practicing that for certain. And again, I mean, I think that, you have to be leery of the rebounding if you're going to make a change like that at halftime, because you can do it all well. I mean, anything you do all well, and then you don't secure the ball at the end of the possession, then you're going to lose a lot of. It's going to go downhill fast for you, for sure.
Okay. Is there any stuff that maybe you used to run defensively that you don't run anymore, but that you can look back on and be like, man, like, I guess you would say that works really well at the high school level, or if I was a high school coach, I would do this defensively. I think Alex and I both would appreciate a little insight there.
Sure. You know what? When I coached high school basketball, we didn't have a shot clock in Wisconsin, and so and we were good, so teams would try to hold the ball, at times. So, we used a 1-2-2 half court trap, and we had a few different calls out of it because sometimes teams would load up sidelines, so we would overload and basically give up. We'd empty the basket even just to get in all the passing lanes because we were big at times. Just because if they put extra guys on the sideline, they swing out and swing out again. Now they're going to attack you on the back, with the big at the rim, and they're moving the ball out and they're moving you. Again, just talking like we're talking about the 1-3-1, they're getting ball movement, changing sides or going downhill against you. So we might totally sell out and just sell out to the trap. So the first great trap we have, everybody has a coverage. So our big will come out of the basket and cover the middle, and somebody, everybody's covered. I think it's really important that you have a way to create turnovers, at the high school level. I think it is. We did ours in the half court. We didn't do it in the full court. I've pressed, and certainly in college with the shot clock, we pressed more than we did in high school. But I think, you'll run into, a lot of teams that have a secondary shaky ball handler, or a real limited ball handler as a starter, or whatever it is, maybe not a great passing, or like I said earlier, you just disrupt them. They're just a system team. They're really good at running flex or fill in the blank or whatever they do. They do it really well. But if you can get them out of that and you can rebound at the end of it, you can create some, unexpected shots, which in many ways can be just as good as a turnover. And so, that I think that's important on the high school level. I mean, I think I know it changes. I mean, I respect the heck out of high school coaches because you don't know. I walked into a situation with great players, and my dad had a great program. These guys knew how to play. Like, they were coached by some amazing, summer guys from the youth program. And so, but a lot of times, your 5-man is 5'11" or 6 foot or whatever it is. Your guards can't shoot, or you have one handler and he's a sophomore, and so you have to do what you have to make do. But I think if you can build your program, if you can take a look at your district, your school district, and say, what type of talent am I getting? And then, so I think there's two ways to analyze that. You look at the quality of talent. Am I getting top 3 talent in our league consistently? So if you think you're able to get top 3 talent in your league, okay, then I think, you want to generate more possessions, right? You want to find ways to be in the high end, creating turnovers, getting up and down, find some ways to create those possessions. Even if maybe you're not as athletic as other teams, but you're definitely a team that can find ways to score the ball. If you're a bottom 3 talent, then we got to look at, skill development at the younger levels. You got to start building that skill and then getting excited for playing basketball and then you got to find a system that negates, on both sides of the ball, the top talent. So in that case, I think you're more of a pack defensive team potentially, or maybe multiple. I mean, ultimately defense is disrupting, it is, so with your pack, you're just making it hard for them to get anything at the rim, and you're closing your pressure, you're blowing them up, you're multiple, you're getting them confused, you're switching this, creating this again, some sort of blowing them up or creating situations, pressing. They're all disruptive. They're all some sort of disruption that they're trying to create. So you have to decide who do you need to disrupt, like who is it, what style, and then what are you going to have to do, like what type of disruption works best for you. So I mean, there are so many different ways to do it. But I do think you always have to have a way to turn guys over. I think the other thing I would say, one other thing that works for high school, surprisingly, trapping ball screens. Like when you blitz the ball screens, we were not the most athletic team in our league the first time around here at St. Leo. We were athletic, but not the most athletic and not the best. There was a national champion in our league, but we finished, we went to 3 NCAA tournaments. We won the league one time, finished second, finished third. We had, I was shocked actually. And some of the great teams in our league used the ball screen, early transition stuff. Just stopped doing it against us. It was so disruptive, even though they would get some good stuff too, for sure. Like they would get, some good baskets and, layups. And we really worked hard on not fouling in the blitz. But I mean, you're talking about professional level, point guards and guys who are playing and still overseas to this day. Like now we're not going to run the ball screen against St. Leo. We're not going to do it. So I do think there's something to that. You have to work on angles, work on not fouling. You got to be early, and then guys got to get in positions. The big part is the trap is really important. You can't create offense out of the trap, but also like the rotation and the communication is important. But then the rotation back, it's just like running back on a press. Like what Patino used to have, back tap and run certain lanes to get, most likely the pass is going to get there. I think it's the same thing in the half court coming out of a trap. It's really a half court transition, right? And you can create another lousy shot or a turnover that really had nothing to do with the trap because somebody sped up. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, more times than not, they'll get out of the trap. But what we see is a lot of like an overhandling guard will just kind of dribble all over heck. And then pretty soon he's just driven himself down to the short corner and no place to go because he's just trying to survive. And then something bad happens out of that. And then now you're off and running. So, yeah, definitely that. I think that's an underrated thing. People just kind of scared of it because they think they got to have these long elite athletes. That helps, but not necessarily.
Okay. All right, Alex, we might need to start trapping ball screens next year.
I know. And that was something, that was something that for me, because we run a ball screen. I run the European continuity ball screen offense because, I mean, it's what we ran at Cuesta. So I brought that over. And, I mean, on the girls' side, there's like very, very few teams that I've seen that run that, especially out here. I mean, I don't know, honestly. Maybe not even one team that I ran against last year that actually did that. But and when teams would play us in regular man, we would do really well against it because they couldn't handle that constant screen and roll, cut to the basket, swing, they weren't able to handle it. But a couple teams, and basically the other top team in our league, they started the first time they didn't trap it. Second game, they trapped us every time off of it, and it just screwed us up so bad. And the first game was like a 5-point game. The second game we lost by like 20, 25, and my girls just couldn't figure it out. And at halftime, we just threw away. I said, we're not going ball screen anymore. We're going to run a 4-out motion, and it was just, it's kind of like what you said, like if you don't have players that can make those reads on the court, and if you don't practice against it enough, then it's going to be really disruptive when you're constantly getting trapped and your point guard has to make the right decision every single time they come off that screen.
Yeah. That's, and you actually, you talking about that raises a good point too. I think if you're not the top talent in your league, and even if you are in that top 3, I guess, regardless, but I think if you're not always getting, sometimes some leagues just have some team that just, they got McDonald's All-Americans or whatever they got. They just got the guys every year. They're just going to be a monster. You set things up to beat them, right? A lot of times after a while, when you're like, hey, we're the second or third best team, but they're always the best. Sometimes we win it. So you start figuring that out. But that's important. But I think it's more important too is to have something that's simple and unique too in the league. If you don't have the top talent in the league, something that's unique to the league, like maybe your middle talent. That probably makes more sense. And everybody in your league is fast. Well, then it's good to be a half court. Develop a half court team, or maybe be his own team. Everybody plays man to man. Or everybody plays zone. We're going to be man to man. Everybody pack. We're going to pressure. Something that's different, because just like we talked about, like all of a sudden you play the one team that does something like you've only prepped, you might only have 1 day, 2 days, no days, 3 days to prep for that game. And all of a sudden, you just don't spend enough time throughout the season on specific trapping the post, trapping there, a matchup zone, whatever it is, I think you raise a good point there for sure.
All right. Well, some great tips for us to think about, and definitely we have this recorded so we can always come back to it when the season gets a little closer. But all right, that's really all we got for this week. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, or listening in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, please subscribe as well. Thank you, Coach, so much for joining us. We release a new episode every single week, and we hope to see everybody in the next one. Thank you. Bye.